And now, introducing our host for the speaker broadcast, Alexis Jones.
Thank you so much. First off, I want to welcome the 340 chapters that are joining us nationwide. We are broadcasting live from the University of California at Irvine. So round of applause for these guys. It's hard to imagine that it's already 2013, but I'm feeling pretty good about it. I don't know about you guys. Before I really dive into tonight, I want to get through a couple announcements. The first one is congratulations to all the scholarship and award winners. We ended up giving away over $40,000 worth of money to help make students' dreams come true, something we're really proud of at the Society. And if you want to learn more about that, you can go to the website. In addition, for people who were not able to apply for those scholarships, we have an application coming out February 1st. But keep in mind that the deadline is February 15th, the day after Valentine's, so mark your calendars, because we have a lot more money that we want to give away to people so that we can help make their dreams come true. Next off, we have a really, really exciting announcement. We just created a partnership with True Nature Education. One of the reasons we're really excited about them, and bear in mind, they are a service-based organization that does travels to Costa Rica. No big deal. It's pretty awesome. And with that, what the opportunity for students to do is to go there and make a difference while also exploring in a third world country. Not to mention, we really believe that they're exactly in alignment with the Society because they both have values that are very community service oriented. So if you want to travel to Costa Rica, if you want to do service-based work during spring break or summer of 2013, go to the website. There's a lot more information on that, and you can just click on partners. Next up, especially if you're watching this live, there are 3 ways in which you can participate in tonight's broadcast. There's a trivia question, there's a poll question, and then there are text-in questions for our speaker. So first up is a trivia question, and the first person to write in the correct answer, I love how I always have to reference the right answer. People just send answers in and they think they're going to win. No, it has to be correct. The first correct answer in will win $250 worth of prizes, and the question is, what is the first principle of leadership of Rudy Giuliani's? So text that into the number on the screen, and we'll get to those answers during the question and answer portion of tonight's broadcast. Second up, we have a poll question. The poll question has to do with New Year's resolutions. Did you make one, is the question. If your answer is yes, you're going to text in NSLS1. If your answer is no, you're going to text in NSLS2. And if your question is not yet, you're going to text in NSLS3 again to the number on the screen. We will get to all of those answers later in the broadcast. Last up is, if you are interested in asking our speaker questions tonight, you can text them in again to the number on the screen. I'll be able to ask those questions on your behalf. And bear in mind that if I don't get to them during the actual broadcast, we're doing a new thing called Success Talks, which will be 15 minutes after the broadcast. I'll get to as many questions as possible, and I'll be able to ask the audience your questions, and we'll be able to provide that video 1 month after the deadline. Last up, I get to do a little intro for a man I was not only wildly impressed by from a personal standpoint, but also a professional standpoint. It's very rare, I think, that you meet someone who is as impressive on paper as Mr. Rudy Giuliani, but it's another thing when you get to meet him and shake his hand and he is as genuine as anyone I've ever met, as humble as anyone I've ever met. Some of the impressive things about Mr. Giuliani: he was the 107th mayor of New York City. During his terms there, he was able to decrease significantly the crime rate. One of the most impressive things during his opportunity to be mayor was that he was also there during the atrocities of 9/11. He was able to show us what true leadership looks like when our country was torn apart, and was able to be the person to help mend us back together. During his reign as mayor during that time, he also was acknowledged as Person of the Year for Time magazine in 2001. He was knighted by the Queen, another no big deal. And on top of it, he is referred to in modern day as one of the most effective chief executives. So please help me welcome Mr. Rudy Giuliani.
Thank you very, very much. It's a great pleasure to be here and to talk about a subject that means a great deal to me. And the only thing I'm going to have to do now is change my first principle of leadership, because Eric right here knows it, and he'll win the prize if I. But I guess I'll keep it the same anyway. I decided about 12 years ago to write a book about leadership. And the way I went about doing it is I tried to figure out the things that made me a leader. What were the things that got me to be mayor of New York, United States attorney in the Southern District of New York, the third ranking official in the Justice Department. I ran a coal business and took it out of bankruptcy. Tried to go over all my experiences where I had been in charge of something, put in charge of something, very often something that was in trouble that I had to fix. And where did I learn these lessons from? And as I was writing the book, I figured it out. I learned most of it from other people. I basically copied other people. I took the things that I thought worked for them, then I applied it to me, maybe had to change it a little. Sometimes I couldn't do it as well as they did. Sometimes I could do it differently. And then I also learned an awful lot of it from reading biographies, reading about people who had succeeded. So I wrote the book, and the book was just about done. I'd say maybe a week away from being done when September 11, 2001 happened. It was actually sitting in my desk drawer at home. The draft of it was, and I was just about finishing it. And then I went through by far the worst experience of my life, and maybe the greatest experience of my life, for about 4 months of nonstop, 24 hours a day. When I finished being mayor, I wanted to go back to the book, and I couldn't for about 3 or 4 months. Really couldn't concentrate for a while. And when I went back to it, it was a very strange feeling because, first of all, I was very thankful that I had written the book, because somehow God had helped me spend the 7 or 8 months before September 11 thinking about leadership and thinking about all the things that worked for me and all the things that didn't. And I probably used every single one of them from September 11 until January 1st of 2002. And second, I realized that some of the things were wrong. I'll tell you the main thing that was wrong. When I wrote the book about leadership, I wrote it because I thought I had been through everything. I thought as United States attorney fighting organized crime and terrorism and white-collar crime and political corruption. I thought as a mayor of a city that has a crisis a week and a catastrophe a month. I had been through every emergency imaginable, airplane crashes, hostage situations, subway derailments, blackouts, tremendous high-rise fires. I mean, these are the things you deal with. So I thought I'd been through everything, so this book would really be useful because I'd been through everything. And then all of a sudden I was faced with something I never imagined that was way beyond anything I'd ever faced before, and it gave me a sense of humility about the fact that you never know what life has in store for you. And you're never finished learning. Right? You graduate from college, or you get a master's degree, or a doctorate, or a law degree, or a medical degree. You never finish with learning because life is constantly throwing new challenges at you. And leadership is very, very important because I'm asked all the time, are leaders born or made? My answer is they're made. Of course, they have to get born first. We got to get over that important fact. But once we get over that important fact of being born, what I'm trying to tell you is most of it are things you learn, not things that are genetically part of you. Sure, they can help or hurt, but mostly it's what you learn. So if that's true, then you can teach leadership. If I can learn it, you can teach it. And we don't think of it that way in our educational system. We teach many, many subjects. We teach ethics, and we teach philosophy, and we teach arithmetic, and we teach history, and we teach English, and we teach all kinds of stuff, geography, but we don't teach leadership. And it is something that can be taught, it's something that can be learned, and it's something you can improve at. And if you want to succeed, you have to be a leader. You have to stand out. So what is a leader? Before I give you the 6 principles that I'm going to talk about, I'll tell you what a leader really is. A leader is a person who sets a direction. Leader is the person who tells us where we're going and how we're going to get there. That's a football coach, right? Sets a direction. That's a president. That's a CEO. That's the person in charge of a local store with 5 employees. Person in charge is the leader. Sets a direction. What are we trying to accomplish? Where are we going? So, the most important principle of leadership, the first one, is to be a leader, you have to have a strong set of beliefs. You have to know what you believe. You have to know what you believe and where you're taking the organization in order to even start to be a leader. So to be a leader, you have to have a strong set of beliefs. If it's business, you have to have a sense of what you want to accomplish with this business. What's your long-term goal? How big do you want to be? Not just floating along every day and not just, well, we'll see and maybe, and nobody can follow we'll see and maybe we're going to do this. And if people are going to follow you, you need to give them a direction. A political leader has to have a group of idealistic principles that they're trying to accomplish. Probably the best example of a leader, pure leader, is the captain of a ship. Captain of a ship is in charge. Under laws of admiralty, the captain of a ship is like a dictator. What's the most important thing, or what's the first thing a captain of a ship has to do for anything else to make sense? He has to pick a destination. He has to decide, where are we going? If the captain of a ship can't say, hey, we're going to Hawaii, or we're going to London, or we're going to New York, or we're going to the Panama Canal. If he can't say that, then how the heck can the people working on the ship contribute? How can they contribute in any meaningful sense if he doesn't set a direction? If he doesn't get out front, stand in front of the crew and say, we're going to Bermuda. So setting a direction is the most important part of leadership, being able to step out and set a direction. Now, I told you I learned most of what I know about leadership from other people. I'll tell you who I learned that from. I learned that from President Ronald Reagan. I worked for President Reagan when he was the President of the United States. Tomorrow I'm going to have the honor of speaking at the Reagan Library, so it's very much in my mind, the work that I did with him. And President Reagan did many things. I'm not going to say this is the only thing he did, but here was the most remarkable thing about him. He had a strong set of beliefs, and they never changed. They were always the same. I could define President Reagan with just 2 goals. He had 2 goals from the time he entered politics and ran for governor of California to the time he left the White House. Goal number 1, President Reagan believed that communism was evil, and you had to confront it rather than negotiate with it in order to defeat it. That just negotiating with them, they were able to take advantage of us, but we had to confront them. We had to confront them with such vast military power that we could push them out of existence. Second thing that Ronald Reagan believed was, Ronald Reagan began his adult life as a Democrat, supported Franklin Roosevelt, supported the New Deal, and then watched what he thought was these programs, moving from programs that help people move out of poverty to programs that help lock people in poverty by creating dependency and not showing people how you can get out of that dependency. So he believed that you had to reduce the size of government, lower taxes, in order to encourage movement in the private sector so that people started to take responsibility for themselves. So those were 2 big ideas that he had. Now, he didn't develop those ideas because they were popular. Those ideas were not particularly popular when Ronald Reagan first developed these ideas. He developed them way back in 1962 and 63 and 64. And in 1964, a man ran for president named Barry Goldwater with those principles. Got wiped out. I think he won 1 state. So the point I'm making is that Ronald Reagan didn't develop these ideas because a public opinion poll told him to say that, which is the way a lot of our ideas, quite frankly, are developed now, which is not leadership. If I take a poll, find out what you want me to say, and then I come up here and repeat it, I'm not a leader, I'm an actor. Right? I'm just following what everybody wants. A leader thinks. A leader sits there, thinks, talks, tries to develop what's important, what they believe is important. What you're getting from a leader is the sum total of their education, their intellect, their conscience, their life experience. You're getting a human being that can set a course. So these two things were very important to Ronald Reagan. When they were unpopular, when they were popular, when they were unpopular again, and he stuck to it. By the time he left the White House, basically the Soviet Union was gone, the Berlin Wall was down, Eastern Europe was free. Ronald Reagan delivered from oppression probably a couple 100 million people. Not too many presidents have done that. In fact, I can only think of two presidents that really have delivered large numbers of people from oppression, Abraham Lincoln and Franklin Roosevelt, and then Ronald Reagan. And he did it because he had the strength to lead, to stand out front and to tell people, this is the direction we're going in. And now if you go look at any great business leader, you're going to find the same thing. Great businesses are built on strong ideas, great ideas. And someone who's willing to have that idea and stick with it, whether it's popular or not. So if you want to be a leader, you've got to figure out who you are, and what you want to accomplish. And if you can't lead, because you can't tell anybody what direction we're going in. They can't follow you if all you're doing is one day you're here, the next day you're there, the day after that you're someplace else. So I would urge, particularly on students, spend a lot of time trying to figure out what you want to accomplish in life. Try to figure out what you're good at. And then, if you're in charge of any organization, set goals for it. Try to figure out what goals you want to achieve. If you have a business, a small business, big business, how much bigger do you want it to be? Every year, set goals. Have a 1-year plan and a 5-year plan. The more you plan, the more you can lead. The more you have goals and you can articulate them, the more people will follow you. Now, the second principle of leadership is going to sound strange when I first say it. To be a leader, you have to be an optimist. And by an optimist, I don't mean a fool. I don't mean somebody walking around, the world is falling apart, and you think it's great. By an optimist, I mean somebody that can be a problem solver. Now, whether you want to be a leader or not, I recommend being an optimist. Optimists have many more friends. Nobody likes to go to dinner with a pessimist, right? But if you want to be a leader, you better be an optimist. Suppose when Alexis introduced me, I walked out like this. Things are very bad. And there's no hope. None. Follow me. Well, nobody followed me, right? Does anybody follow me? Nobody ever follows me when I do that. The only place anybody ever follows me, a few people, are in New York City. You know why? Because New York City is so big, we have a few nuts that will follow anything. But basically, people follow the person who says, here's the solution. Here's the answer. Here's the answer to the problem. So train yourself to be an optimist/problem solver. When you see a problem, like your business is not doing well now, you're losing customers, then start thinking about, how do I expand the business? How do I find more customers? How do I go into a different business? Every problem can be approached and either be solved or fixed. Here's what I do, or used to do, when I worked with lots of young lawyers. Because in my life, I ran the largest, not the largest, but I always considered the most important U.S. attorney's office in the country. I've run parts of law firms. I'm part of a law firm now. I've trained numerous lawyers, and this almost invariably happens with most young lawyers when they first have their first big setback in a case. They run into your office and they tell you, oh my God, we just got this brief. It destroyed our arguments. We're going to lose. We're going to lose. I think we're going to lose. So here's what I always did whenever that happened. I wait till they get over the panic and the and I say, oh, okay, sit down. I said, how much time do we have to respond to this? 60 days. I said, good. I want you to go back into your office now. And I want you to sit there for 1 hour. And then I want you to come back into my office. And when you come back into my office, I want you to do exactly the same thing you just did. I don't care. You can yell, scream, you can throw papers around, you can cry. But by the time you leave the office, I want you to give me a solution. I never want you to come into this office again and just give me a problem unless the building is burning down. Because most problems aren't the building burning down. When you come into this office, I want you to train yourself. Come and give me the problem, but you tell me your solution. Don't just count on me to have the solution. And I'm not doing that because I'm trying to be tough on you. I'm doing that because I'm trying to train you to be a leader. I'm trying to train you to think, problem, don't ignore it, absorb it, but then you have to have a thing inside you that says problem means there must be something we can do about this. There must be a way we can approach this. There must be some way in which we can solve it, or some way in which we can make it better, or some way we can reduce it. We've got to be able to find a way to deal with it. And if I can train you to do that, if I can train you to see problems as a challenge to your intellect, if I can train you to do that, then you're going to become a leader. You're just naturally, because who do we gravitate to? We gravitate to the person who presents the solution to the problem. That's what we do in politics, that's what we do in government, that's what we do in religion, that's what we do in philosophy, that's what we do in life. In the old square in Athens, the philosopher that was standing around offering the explanation for life, as opposed to the one who was telling everyone that there was no hope, well, who do they all go listen to? They all went and listened to Socrates, right? They went to listen to the one who was trying to show them how you can explain life, the one who gave them hope. We can find examples of this that we use for evil purposes. This is a very powerful, optimism is an enormously powerful weapon. Problem solving is an awfully powerful draw. And we've seen evil people do that. Hitler rose by offering solutions. Horrible solutions, but solutions to problems that people were having. This is an enormously powerful device, which, when you know how to use it, really has to be in the hands of good people who are using it for good purposes. But if you can train yourself to be a problem solver, I guarantee you'll be successful. Every organization I've ever run, the people who eventually went to the top were the people who, from very early age, were problem solvers. And some of the people that I work with and some people that work for me included a future Attorney General of the United States, a future head of the FBI, about 10 federal judges, people that were enormously successful. When I look back, in most cases, these were the people that in their 20s and their 30s were people that were not just reciting the problem, they were suggesting the solution to it. I'll apply this to your personal life for a minute, because this is a really important lesson. If you can get this, if you forget the rest, you're going to succeed. About 11 years ago, when I was the mayor of New York, I had gone for a routine of physical. My PSA was high, and I went and had it checked. And I wasn't giving it much thought. My doctor called me about 4 o'clock in the afternoon, and he said, "Mayor, your test has come back and it's positive." I said, "Thank you." Well, now wait a second. Doesn't positive mean good? Your child's report card just came back, and they got positive grades. That doesn't mean they failed. Well, with doctors, it's like all screwed up. It's like all turned around this way. So positive meant I had cancer. So I didn't pay an awful lot of attention to it. I was so busy and it didn't hit me right away. I did all the stuff I had to do that day and probably worked until about 10 o'clock at night, went to bed, got up the next morning. When I get up in the morning, when I was mayor in particular, I would always look at the two tabloid newspapers in New York, the Daily News and the New York Post. They have big headlines. I love the headlines because that's where they sell the newspaper, with the headlines. They always exaggerate everything. And they often disagree with each other. So I took out the Post first and I looked at it and it said, "Mayor has cancer." So I don't like that headline. I put it. Look, the other one, "Mayor has cancer." Now they both agreed I knew I had cancer. So I had to figure out now, what am I going to do about it? I started to get nervous. I started to get frightened. I started thinking of my father who died of cancer. And I started to really feel sorry for myself. I was healthy. I was safe. I was doing great. I had so much energy. And now look, I have this, could kill me. And after about 2 days of talking to people who went through cancer, particularly prostate cancer, talking to my wife who's a nurse, I came to the following conclusion. I said, you know something? I'm a very lucky man. I'm a very lucky man because I was given a warning about something that could kill me that I can do something about. Some people don't get that warning. Nobody guarantees you that warning. My goodness, people die instantly sometimes. A few months later, I was going to watch almost 3,000 people die instantly with no warning. So I said, I'm a very, very lucky man because now here's the challenge. I got to do something about this. Either slow it down or cure it. But in any case, I can take this problem and I can make it better. And I approached my entire treatment that way. I talked to many people that have prostate cancer and many people that have cancer, and I urged them, you remain optimistic, you give yourself a much better chance of getting cured. Optimism is enormously powerful. In order to be optimistic, you have to understand the third principle of leadership, which is courage. You have to have courage. What does courage mean in this context? A lot of people, when you say courage, they often kind of put themselves out of that category. They often say, oh, I don't have, courage is for like people who are fearless, like the people who win the Congressional Medal of Honor, or the people who, well, the firefighters who go into fire and save people. They say to themselves, I don't have that kind of courage. Well, the fact is, they're not fearless. A man who's a firefighter who runs into the fire is afraid of the fire. He just doesn't let the fear immobilize him. Here's what you do with fear. And in this context of being a leader, mostly what fear means is being willing to take a risk, being willing to try something different. There's a tremendous inertia in government bureaucracies, largely because in government bureaucracies, there is no reward for success. There's a tremendous penalty for failure. You get blamed if the program doesn't work. But rarely is there a great reward for success, like there is in the private sector, right? You discover a great medicine that can cure prostate cancer, you become a millionaire. You become a billionaire. Or you get the Nobel Prize. You become very famous. Something really nice happens to you. You solve a problem in government, usually somebody else takes the credit. But you make a mistake. So in government, nobody steps out and suggests solutions. Because it takes courage to do that. Because if I go start a new business, look, no matter how great a business it is, no matter how great an idea it is, if I expand my business, it can fail. Anything can fail. So in order to be a leader, you have to be willing to take risks. But if you want to know how to take fear and use it properly, then I used a firefighter as an example. What does the firefighter do about the fear of fire? The firefighter trains. The firefighter practices. The firefighter just doesn't run into fire. He trains with other firefighters. He tries to get the best equipment to put on. Bunker gear, heat-seeking equipment. Why is all that being done? It's all being done because he understands how dangerous fire is, and he's reducing the risk. Well, the same thing has to be done when you make a decision to do something new, something different, you got to spend a lot of time figuring out how to reduce the risk. And that gets me to the fourth principle, which is relentless preparation. When I was a young lawyer, my first official position was as a law clerk to a federal judge. He was a great influence on my life. He's another person from whom I learned a great deal. His name was Lloyd McMahon, Judge McMahon. And first or second day I was working for him, because he wanted all of his young law clerks to be trial lawyers, he used to say, I'm going to teach you a lesson, and this will make you a great trial lawyer if you follow it. For every 1 hour in court, 4 hours of preparation. You don't win cases in the courtroom, you win cases in your office. Go over everything, rehearse everything. Have somebody play the witness, have somebody play the judge, have somebody play the other lawyer. Nothing should happen in the courtroom that is not anticipated. This is great advice, by the way, for any presentation you ever have to give, for any job interview you have to go on, for any sales pitch you have to give. Just don't go do it, practice it. People sometimes are afraid to stand up in public and give a talk. You know why they're afraid? Because they're afraid they're going to make a mistake. They're afraid they're going to make a fool out of themselves. They're afraid they're going to do it. Well, now, the more you practice, the more you're in command of the subject, the more it's second nature, that fear starts to go away. Or in fact, what you're doing is you're using that fear to make yourself better. That's what firefighters do. That's what relentless preparation is all about. But then Judge McMahon had an addition to that advice that was actually the wisest. He said, no matter how much you prepare, no matter how much you go over things, something unanticipated always happens. Something you didn't think of always occurs. The lawyer comes up with something, the witness lies, something goes wrong. He said, but if you follow my advice of tremendous preparation, 4 hours for every 1 hour, you'll know the answer to the unanticipated just like that. It'll come to you. It'll just be a variation of all the things you worked on. And people are going to think, oh, he's so smart, he can think on his feet. He just thought of that. He didn't just think of that. He prepared for it. Now, I'll tell you, that lesson helped me so many times in the courtroom where I spent a lot of time. It helped me a lot as a mayor, as a chief executive. Helped me the most on September 11. It helped me the most on September 11 because when I was first notified of the attack on the World Trade Center, I was about 6 miles away in Midtown Manhattan. I was just finishing breakfast. Interestingly, talking to a friend of mine about his wanting to run for governor of California. And as it ended, one of the police officers came up to me, said to my counsel something. Denny Young, my counsel, leaned over to me and said, Mayor, we're going to have to leave. There's a very bad fire at the World Trade Center. A twin-engine plane has hit the North Tower. Now, obviously, that was understated. Things were much worse than I had originally thought. But that's the way I started off going down to the World Trade Center. I rushed down there. I was about a mile away, the second plane hit, so I knew it was a terrorist attack. When I got there, I still didn't quite comprehend how bad this was. Because I told you, I'd been through everything. This was another terrible thing. As I got about 30 or 40 feet away from the fire department command post, right at the base of the North Tower that was all aflame at the top, the police were telling me to look up because debris was falling down, hitting people. It was a horrible thing to see. People getting hit with this debris, some of them being crushed. But as I was looking up, I realized what I was just watching at that moment was not debris. It was a man. Looked like, he was so far away, I'm sure I imagined this, but it looked like he was trying to make a decision about whether to throw himself out or stay there with the fire behind him. And then he made the decision, and he threw himself out. And I just froze, probably in a state of shock, although I wouldn't have acknowledged it then. I was probably in a state of shock, and I just watched him come all the way down, hit where he hit. And all of a sudden, I grabbed the arm of the police commissioner, and I said, this is much worse than anything we've ever faced before. It's way off the charts. We don't have a plan for this. We're just going to have to go on our instincts and just hope that God helps us. And what I meant by that was we had all kinds of emergency plans for all those things I mentioned. Airplane crashes and building collapses and high-rise fires. But we didn't have a plan that said airplanes being used as missiles attacking our building. So I thought we were going to have to make this up. But right away, in an emergency like that, you get seconds to think. So that thought probably lasted, honestly, 2 seconds. Immediately, I had to decide. We had to call the White House to get air support because we were hit twice, but we had no idea, were we going to hit 3 times, 4 times, 5 times, 6 times? 7 planes, we were told, were unaccounted for. How many of those were headed for New York? So we had to get airplanes to come in, protect us, jet fighters to protect us. We had to evacuate 400,000 or 500,000 people from that area because in order to get the emergency vehicles in, the fire trucks and the ambulances, these people were in the streets. We had to evacuate them. We evacuated about 400,000 people from the island. The police commissioner immediately said to me, I'm going to stop anybody else from coming in. Why did he tell me that? He told me that because we were afraid there might be suicide bombings. We were afraid that this may have been a signal to Islamic terrorists to engage in suicide bombings. And then the police commissioner said to me, should I dispatch police officers to our priority targets? And I said yes. And we had to triage the hospitals because the hospitals were already overwhelmed with people. There were only 3 hospitals in that immediate area, and there were thousands of people that were injured. And we had to bring in generators so we could light up Ground Zero because all the power was out, so we could work all night. About halfway through making all of those decisions, the words of my mentor, Judge McMahon, came into my head. I remember exactly. If you prepare for everything you can think of, you'll be prepared even for the unexpected. And every single decision I made came from a plan, except it was something else, like evacuating people from Lower Manhattan came from our plans for flooding and hurricanes. The decision on bringing a generator to Ground Zero, we got them from 2 of them from GE, came from our plan for blackouts, of which we had 2 during the time that I was mayor. Our decision on what were the priority targets came from years and years and years of gathering intelligence from Islamic extremists that were arrested. And when they were arrested, they have in their possession the things they wanted to bomb: the New York City subways, the stock exchange, the Brooklyn Bridge. So over the years, we had developed a priority list of what do they seem most interested in attacking. So as I thought that, I said to myself, you know something, we are prepared. We're prepared because we thought of everything else. So I felt pretty good about my ability to make the decision. I felt a little more confidence. But then I also felt like I'm going to hand it over to people and they will know what to do because they can relate it to a period of time they did this when they weren't under such stress. Things weren't as horrible. So relentless preparation is an enormously important part of leadership. If you run any kind of team, the more time you can work on preparing them to do it right, whether it's a sales force or whatever it is, the better the returns are going to be. And the 5th principle is obvious. The minute I said team, the 5th principle of leadership is teamwork. The judge had another little lesson that applies here. He used to say to all his law clerks near the very beginning, he would say to you, what do all federal judges have in common? You'd say, Judge, I don't know. They're all old. And he'd say, no. Some are, but that's not it. So here's what they have in common. Every single one of them is either a Republican or a Democrat. And they get selected by the President of the United States because they're a Republican or a Democrat, mainly a political process. But when they get appointed, some of them begin to believe that they were selected by God. God put me here. I'm a judge, which means I know everything. I don't need any help. Needing any help means weakness. And he said exactly the wrong response. Exactly the wrong response. If you are in charge of anything, little, medium-sized, or big, if you are put in charge of any group of people, then I want you to ask yourself this question first. If you can answer this question correctly, you will immediately make your organization better than you. Here's the question. What are my weaknesses? If your answer to that is none, ask your wife or your husband. And if the two of you are just like a mutual admiration society, ask your children, because they sure as heck know your weaknesses. You have weaknesses. We all do. The art of being a leader is knowing how to balance strengths and weaknesses. It doesn't just mean on the team. It means your strengths and weaknesses. So when I became mayor of New York City, I had to accomplish two things, big things. One, I had to reduce crime, because New York City was considered the crime capital of America. It was on the front page of Time magazine as the rotting of the Big Apple. Second thing I had to do was I had to fix the economy. Not only did we have a tremendous amount of crime, but we had 10.5% unemployment, higher than today. We had 1.1 million people on welfare. We had just lost 400,000 to 500,000 jobs, and we were losing population. So I had to fix crime, I had to fix the economy. I had a strength and I had a weakness. I knew how to fix crime. I spent most of my career, before I became the mayor of New York, in law enforcement, on the streets, right up to one of the highest positions in Washington. I knew exactly what I wanted to do. I've been thinking about it for years. I've been watching what I thought was being done wrong for years. I knew exactly how to change it. I needed very good people to help me. I couldn't do it myself, but at least I understood what they were doing, and I understood it as well as they did. On the other side, the economy, I didn't know much about the economy. Wasn't an economist. Never spent my time thinking about things like that. So I had to say to myself, I got to get really good people to help me with both, but these people to help me on the economy, they better be really, really good, and I'm going to have to defer to them. I may be the mayor, but I don't know what I'm doing. They know what they're doing. I can learn from them. A year or two later, I became an expert on the economy, but it took 2 years. So whenever you take over an organization, think about, what do you do well, what don't you do well? You know, in a business organization, maybe you're great at presentations and sales and marketing, but maybe you're not so good at analysis. Maybe you're not so good at paperwork. Maybe you're not so good at background work. Maybe not so good at long-term planning. Go get yourself a number 2 person that is good at what you're not good at. It's like all these 4 or 5 new people that were selected as heads of these football teams, you know, the new coaches. I think about 4 or 5 have been selected in the last couple of weeks. First thing I would do if I was made a head football coach and I had just been an offensive coordinator, I'd go get the best defensive coordinator I could find. Because obviously, if I've been spending the last 4 or 5 years thinking about offense, I haven't been spending as much time thinking about defense. Balance. If you can balance your own strengths and weaknesses, you will do a very good job of balancing the strengths and weaknesses of the people on your team. If you don't do that, then the rest of it is a blur. You can't see other people's strengths and weaknesses accurately if you can't see your own. And the final principle that I'll leave you with today is, to be a leader, you have to communicate. A leader is, another way to simplify what a leader is a teacher and a motivator. The leader usually doesn't do the work, right? The football coach doesn't throw passes, doesn't intercept passes, doesn't block, doesn't defend. What he does is, the best football coaches are the ones who teach people how to do that better than anybody else teaches people how to do it, and motivates them to do it better than anybody else motivates them to do it. That's what a great leader mostly is, a teacher and a motivator. Both of those things require communication. You can be the smartest guy in the world, the woman in the world. If you can't communicate, you can't lead. Other people don't know what you want from them. Every organization that I've ever studied that was failing, either ones that I took over or ones that I consulted with, usually people will tell me, I didn't know what was expected of me. Nobody told me. Nobody told me what they wanted. Nobody told me what the direction was. Nobody told me. Communication is so important. Now, I believe very, very strongly, if you have a long-term goal for an organization, you've got to give people feedback on whether or not you're achieving those goals. You can't just say, I want to reduce crime. I want to reduce welfare. So now let's go do it. And it'll take 5 years, but we'll get it done. If I'm going to do that, I have to break that down into how much do I want to reduce it every month? How am I going to measure whether it's working or not? Because if I can measure how it's working, if we're going in the wrong direction, I can make a mid-course correction. So I believe in metrics. I believe in measuring using feedback for people with numbers. I reduce crime by measuring crime in every part of the city, every day, 77 precincts, had a CompStat report every day. Every week I went over it. I looked at where we were making progress and where we were failing. And where we were failing, we made changes. We didn't look at crime at the end of the year and say, oh, wow, we reduced crime, that's great, or crime went up, what are we going to do about it? We did it every day, every week, along the way. And then we were able to look at what worked, what didn't work. It's called the CompStat system. It's used by New York City. It's been used by New York City first for 8 years by me and now 11 years by Mayor Bloomberg. And when I started, New York City had had 1,900 murders. When I left, it had less than 600. Now it has less than 500. Crime has reduced about 80% in New York City from the time we started the CompStat system. And no other city has a record even close to that, because we measure what we want to achieve. You want to achieve growth in your business? Figure out what kind of growth, figure out how much is realistic every month, figure out what people have to do to contribute that, try to figure out a numerical way of describing it, and give them feedback on whether you're getting to that goal. Because if you're not, you can correct it before everything goes wrong. For example, year 2000, first 2 months of the year, tremendous increase in larceny, theft. Man, after years of reducing crime, all of a sudden it's up 20%. Why? People were stealing personal computers from the big office buildings in Manhattan. By having those statistics and seeing that, we were able to figure it out, we were able to develop a program for it, and by the end of the year, it was all down by 15%. But you've got to have metrics. When we wanted to reduce welfare, what I did was I said, I'm going to turn my welfare workers into employment agents. I don't want them just to sign people up for welfare. What I want them to do is find jobs for people. And I'd say to welfare workers, if you find a job, I'll give you a bonus. And then we set up a whole big system, a job stat system. And our welfare workers started to get paid and promoted based on how many jobs they find for people. They got a nice bonus if they found a job. They got a much bigger bonus if they found a good job. The longer the person stayed with the job, the better the bonus. Over a period of 8 years, I changed my welfare office into an employment office, which is, after all, what a welfare office should be. You don't want somebody to go on welfare if they don't have to go on welfare. Why do you want to put somebody in dependency if they don't have to be in dependency? It's hard sometimes when you put people in the dependency, it's hard for them to keep up the work ethic. Work ethic isn't natural particularly. You develop it, and you got to sustain it. So we measured it, and we gave feedback. Here's the difference. When I came into office, there were 1.1 million people on welfare. When I left office, there were 500,000 people on welfare. That's 600,000 people we moved off welfare. About 500,000 to jobs. The other 100,000 probably went to New Jersey. Please, take that off the television, and Chris Christie will get very mad at me if I say it. But he'll fix their problems because he's a great governor. Last thought about communication. Metrics is really important, and if you want to really learn about it, read my book, because it's really complicated. Hard to describe in a short period. There's a last part of communication that's really important. If you want to be a leader, you have to love people. You have to really love people. You have to care about them. You have to like being with them. You have to enjoy them. You have to let them know they're important. I have a chapter in my book that's entitled, Weddings Discretionary, Funerals Necessary. And that can mean a lot of things. But it was a lesson from my father. My father taught me when I was very young, it's more important to go to a funeral than a wedding. And it's much more important to go to a funeral than a wedding because people need you more at a funeral than a wedding. A wedding is a great celebration, everybody's happy. If you can go, it's great. But a funeral is a horrible loss usually for the people that you care about and know. And it's really important that people be there. to hug you, or squeeze them. Well, I applied that to every organization I was in this way. I always felt it was much more important for me to be there when things go wrong than when they're going right. If something goes wrong in the business, if something goes wrong in the government agency, when my firefighters or police officers or New York City workers got injured, I'd get up no matter where I was, I would leave and go to the hospital because I wanted to make sure they got the best care. And I wanted them to know how important they were to me and how I realized I was getting the glory, they were taking the risks. And I wanted to make sure they got the best care. Now, if you do that in your little organization or big organization, in fact, if you do that in your life, you're going to have a lot of friends. That is, be there when people need help. Be there when things go wrong. Be there when things go wrong in their personal lives. People are people. We're all people. Things go wrong in their personal lives. Be there to help them. If you can do that in your organization, you will create an organization that gives back above and beyond the call of duty. That's what creates an organization in which people push a little harder, go a little further, because you've done that for them. It's the most important lesson of communication that I can give you. Care about people, make them feel like they're human beings. And sometimes when you rely on metrics too much, and you don't have that other part, it really starts to make people feel like they're just numbers. So it's really important if you use metrics a lot to make sure that you reach out to people and you know that they're going through difficulties and you know that they're going through problems. So those are my 6 lessons. There are about 20 more. Again, you can read my book if you want those 20 more. But I think these are the 6 that probably are the most relevant. And now we're going to have time for questions, but I really enjoyed this very much. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Mayor. Now, before we dive into all of the questions that I have for you, I just want to take a second to announce the trivia winner. We actually have 2 trivia winners. This is funny because we gave a handout that gave your first principle, which is one of the correct answers, but then you also gave another one during your speech. So someone also named that one. So we have 2, actually. The first one is Marvin McCoy. Congratulations. And the second one is Hasbia Alecandracia. Sorry, I butchered that. I try every time. Second up, we have the poll, and how it came back was, did you create a New Year's resolution? 56% said yes, 35% said no, and I plan to, 9%. You mentioned some of the things in order to get things accomplished, and I just wanted to share a few tips that we had. If you have already created them, and if you're still wanting to create them, one is, are they realistic when you create a New Year's resolution? I think we all ideally say, we're going to lose 30 pounds. But are you really putting together a plan to actually make that happen? Those tangible, biteable, measurable things that you were talking about, I think are really important in order to really bring that to fruition. The creating milestones is really important. And then the other one, which I hadn't even thought about, but I think is brilliant, is we have access to technology today. So there tends to be an app for your phone for everything. And it's a really easy thing to have on a handheld device that's with you all the time. So whether or not that's trying to eat healthy or to exercise better or to financially be more savvy or more conscious about how you're spending money, there's so many different online apps. So definitely use technology to your advantage. Now, diving into questions. Thank you for your patience. One of the things you talked about was courage. And I thought that was really interesting. Brene Brown, who's my favorite author right now, she has this incredible distinction in courage. And she said, for a long time, we've defined courage as the willingness to put your life on the line, as you referenced firemen. She makes a little addendum to that. She says she believes real courage is the willingness to put your vulnerability on the line. I think as a leader, it's one of the things that's really important. And I'm curious, to what degree do you think it's important to integrate vulnerability and transparency into your leadership?
Well, I think she's right. I mean, when we think of courage as being willing to put your life on the line, that sort of dramatizes it to the situation of the firefighter or the soldier who wins the Congressional Medal of Honor. A lot of people don't access that. A lot of people feel, that's beyond me. I wouldn't be able to do that. Reality is that there are situations presented to you in life where it takes just as much courage as running into the fire. If you're risking something to do something different, if you're going in for a job interview that you think maybe is beyond you and you're going to fail. I mean, the fear of failure very often stops people from doing things. So you have to develop a sense of being willing to take a risk. And then I say, if you feel fear, then spend time preparing. So if you're afraid that you're going to go for this job interview and you're going to fail, instead of not going for the job interview, spend 2 days preparing for it. Go see your best friend and have your best friend conduct the job interview. Go through all the questions that are going to be asked. Go through all the answers you're going to give. Make sure you're giving the right answer. Make sure you're dressed the right way. Make sure you present yourself the right way. I think fear is a very useful emotion if it gets channeled into preparation. I think great football teams win because they practice. Right? They don't just go out and play. So they take the fear of losing and they put it into practicing more. And I think that's a great lesson in all kinds of fear, whether it's fear that you're going to lose your life or fear that you're going to fail, fear that you're going to be embarrassed. The more preparation you do, the more you're using that fear for something positive.
Do you think that people are as afraid of fear as they are to succeed? I'm sorry, of failure as they are to succeed?
I think people are very afraid of failure. I think that very often stops people from doing things that are really good for them, things that they could really take a risk at. And my father was a boxer, and I think I learned this lesson from him. My father said, you can only tell how really great a boxer is going to be first time he gets knocked down. Because the question is, can he get up off the canvas? And I think life is like that. I don't care who you are, you get knocked down. In fact, most great people have had great failures. I think about Steve Jobs, right? He got thrown out of Apple, right? I think about the mayor of my city, Mayor Bloomberg, who's a multi-billionaire, right? Developed one of the great inventions, the computer that is in every brokerage house, every finance institution. You know why Mike developed that? He got fired. He got fired from Salomon Brothers. He took his money from Salomon Brothers, went to Merrill Lynch, and created this business. I mean, if you look at great success stories, there's always failure that is part of it. I think that's what Winston Churchill is another one of my great heroes. Failed at least twice before he became Prime Minister of England. One time, shortly before he became Prime Minister, he was considered to be a gadfly, a warmonger, a fool, a man who had made terrible mistakes. Failure is going to be part of life. You got to get ready for it. You're going to fail. You got to say to yourself, I'm going to take the risk. The reward is great. If I fail, I'll just use it and learn from it. First time I ran for mayor, I lost. I learned more from that election than the elections that I won. And if I hadn't lost that election, if I had won that time, I don't think I'd have been as good a mayor as I was 4 years later, because I wouldn't have done all the preparation that I did the second time to make sure I didn't make that mistake again.
That's amazing. Elsa at Fisher College says, what was your biggest or most difficult decision when you were mayor?
Oh, gosh. I would imagine the decisions I had to make after the attack on the World Trade Center. Because I remember after 2.5, 3 days of making those decisions, I was at the command post. We had just finished, and I had this tremendous pain in my shoulder. My wife's a nurse, and I said to her, called her, I said, maybe I'm having a heart attack. She said, no, you bumped your shoulder a day ago, and that's what's hurting you. But maybe you should just go take a little walk and get out of here, because you've been too locked in. So I went and I walked over to the East River. I walked through this housing development, and these people people who saw me must have been really freaked out. Because this is like the Thursday after the Tuesday. And here's the mayor. I told the cops, just leave me alone. I'm walking through this housing development. These people are walking around looking at me and say, hello, mayor. What the heck are you doing here? So I got to the East River. I looked out at the East River, and I said, dear God, I just made 100 decisions. I'm not sure I made any of them right. I hope you just make them right. Please make them right. Because I'm just a mortal, and this is like beyond me. So for a couple of weeks, I felt that way about September 11th. But I think maybe the humility about it probably helped me to present it to people in a more human way, rather than just ordering them around. But those decisions were very, very difficult.
Antoinetta Alfano, her question is, did you have a role model to look up to, and if so, who and why?
Well, I had a lot of them. When I told you Judge McMahon, who was my role model for being a lawyer, Ronald Reagan, who was my role model for being mayor. I've had role models as lawyers. My father was a role model for courage. My mother for learning. She really taught me to enjoy reading and enjoy learning. All throughout my life, I've had role models. I worked for 2 different United States attorneys. I was eventually United States attorney. I sort of copied what I thought was best of both of them when I got a chance to do that job. So I've had lots of role models. I think all my life, I didn't really discover this until I wrote my book, but all my life I've been copying people. Or I'll read a book like about Churchill, or I'll read a book about someone else, and I've always tried to take lessons from that apply to me. You know, the night of September 11, when I got home, which actually was already September 12th, must have been about 1 in the morning, I watched the attack on television because I had never seen it. I was in a building when the first building came down. So I never saw the building come down. I got trapped in the building for 20 minutes, 25 minutes, but we never actually saw it. So I watched the 2 towers come down, which is the first time I really realized what had happened to the building I was in. And then I went into bed, and just right next to my bedstand was a new biography of Winston Churchill by Jenkins. I opened to 1940 when he became Prime Minister in the Battle of Britain. And I read the 2 chapters about how he organized himself to get the English people through the 7 or 8 months of attacks by the Nazis. Because I find very helpful to me, if I have to go through something difficult, to think that other people have gone through worse. Like when I went through cancer, the thing that got me to think differently about it was people have been through a lot worse forms of cancer than I went through. If they can get through it, I can get through it. Well, if the people of England could get through 7 months of bombardment every day, we could get the people in New York through 1 day, even though it was horrible, of bombardment, even if we had to face more. But I wanted to see how he organized himself, what he did. I'm constantly trying to learn from other people.
If you could be a superhero, who would you be and why?
A superhero? Gosh, I don't think I could be a superhero. But when I was a kid,
Sure.
Superman was always my favorite. I mean, I always liked Superman.
You wanted to fly.
Yeah, lucky I never tried.
Okay, Jonathan says, what would you say is your greatest success in life, both personally and professionally?
I always thought the biggest success that I had was restoring the spirit of the city of New York. Because when I took over as mayor, the city was depressed. If you could describe a city as a person, the city was suffering from clinical depression. Exemplified by a poll that was taken about a month after I was elected and before I took over as mayor, in which 70% of the people of the city wanted to leave if they could, but just didn't have the option to leave. And about 75% thought things were going in the wrong direction and weren't going to get better. By the time I left, those numbers had completely reversed. 70%, 80% wanted to live there. 80% thought we were moving in the right direction. And why did I think that was so important? Because I think ultimately that's what a leader does. A lot of the practical stuff is important, but the most important thing is to get people to feel they can do it. You can accomplish it. We can get this done. If you can get people to move in that direction, then people take over, and then they figure out how to solve problems. But if they're going in the other direction and their eyes are down, then no matter what you do, they're not going to be able to contribute. So I thought that was the most important. And I often thought, if the city were in the condition that we're in, when I first took over with the 70%, 75% that were depressed, we'd have had a much harder time getting through September 11th. I think at least we went into it on a high. Mm-hmm. And the city came through it really unbelievably well.
Do you think that part of your dedication to optimism was that was the result of that?
I've always been an optimist. With a few setbacks, like when I had cancer. And being an optimist doesn't mean you don't have days in which you think, oh my goodness, how are we going to solve this? How are we going to get it done? But then I try to use that to, stop feeling sorry for yourself and figure a way out of this. Mm. My father had another lesson. He used to say, if you're ever in an emergency, if you're ever in a fire, be calm. And if you aren't calm, pretend you are. Make believe you're calm. Because he said the only way you'll be able to figure your way out of the fire is if you remain calm. Then all the options will be available to you. If you start to get nervous, start to get excited, you start to get panicky, you don't see the exit that's open. All you see are all the ones that are blocked. So I always use that lesson whenever, on September 11, that day, the day, I constantly reminded myself, just remain calm. No matter what happens, remain calm. Just try to think logically. And hopefully you'll make the right decision.
Another question. Hannah, Indiana University. She says, have you ever felt like you were standing alone when supporting a personal belief?
Oh, many times, yeah. As mayor? Oh, my goodness. Sure. The first year or two that I was the mayor, I was the most unpopular person in New York City. I announced very early on as mayor of New York that if you were going to get a welfare check, you had to work for the city of New York. I said, I found a law, an old New York law, that allowed me, my corporation council found this law, that allowed me to require people getting public assistance to work up to 20 hours a week for the government. So when people came in for welfare checks, I would have my welfare worker say, I would say to them, can you find a job? We'll help, but if you can't find a job, you can report to the Department of Education, or you can report to the fire department, or you can report to the sanitation department or the parks department. We have work for you. That was very unpopular. Very, very unpopular.
People didn't want to be garbage men?
No, they had to clean garbage trucks. They had to clean the parks. They had, my father also taught me something Martin Luther King Jr. used to say. My father said it to me even earlier. My father used to say, there is no such thing as demeaning work. If you are working to support your family, that's an honorable thing to do. And I always felt that that's, it's much more important that you're taking care of your family than letting somebody else do it. When you let somebody else do it, you start to lose something that you don't necessarily get back. So I remember once I went to my high school that I graduated from, and it's in Brooklyn. And I had just added a new requirement to my requirement, which was if you were going to a city college, which is free, and you were getting welfare, so you got free education and a check, you had to work 10 hours a week. Well, the students went crazy. They were going to strike, they were going to picket, they were going to burn down the city. I don't know what the heck they were going to do. So I went to my old high school, had about 1,000 kids there, and I explained to them that I was doing the best thing for them that ever had been done. Because you're going to go to city college. At that time, I changed this. They didn't even give grades or keep attendance. I don't know how you run a college without grades or attendance, but I said, look, I'm going to introduce something called accountability in your life. You're going to go to work. Many people I know that are successful went to night school and worked while they went to school. I'm going to start to get you to be accountable. That's more important than the education you're getting because there are no grades and there's no attendance. It's going to make the education more meaningful. Boo, boo, boo. They're booing me like crazy. Get out of here, go home. So I resorted to something my mother and father used to say to me all the time. You always do when you get older. I said, you know something? You hate me now, but 20 years from now, you're going to love me. Because I'm doing the best thing. And now, I can't say universally, but every once in a while, I have somebody come up to me in New York and say to me, thank you very much for finding that job for me, or thank you very much for making me work, and I really feel good about that.
Another one, do you have any regrets by Catherine Lee?
Oh my gosh, yeah. I mean, I could write a book about my regrets, but I don't spend time thinking a lot about it. I mean, when I was mayor, I wish I had been able to get control of the school system and totally change it the way I changed the police department and the fire department and welfare, but I couldn't get control. And probably if I got control of it, I would create such a revolution. Mm-hmm. Man, you think it's tough dealing with, I got in trouble once for saying this, dealing with the education establishment. Tough.
Tough.
I had 25 statistical programs for measuring the success of my agencies. Because after it worked with the police department, and it worked with the welfare department, ComStat, JobStat, we created them for every department of government. And frankly, they work better for some than others. So I went to the Board of Education, which I didn't control, and I said, let me set up a statistical system to measure the success of teachers, the way I do police officers and firefighters and da-da-da-da-da-da. And one of those two newspapers, the Post or the Daily News, had a big headline. It said, teachers to mayor, : no stats. They didn't want to be measured. And I don't understand how we can improve American public education until we can hold people accountable who are doing a bad job and reward people with a lot more pay who are doing a good job. I can't turn any organization around. I can't turn any organization around that's failing without a carrot and a stick. Sure. You know, you bring me in to take over a business that's going bankrupt. I'm going to fix it probably by keeping the people that are good and rewarding them more and getting rid of the people that are bad and bringing in new people. Now, you give me a school in New York or any place else in urban America that's failing for 20 years, I can't stay with the same group of people there and expect these kids to have a chance. So to me, I consider the school system, at least in New York and a lot of urban America, a job protection system, not a school system. And I would very much like to have revolutionized that.
That's amazing. Real quick, before we dive into the audience questions, I just want to say we're really excited. Our next speaker is going to be Brad Meltzer, and he is on the History Channel. He's Brad Meltzer Decoded. He also has a national bestseller. Really, really excited about this guy coming for the next time. And can we give a round of applause for the mayor? This has been incredible.
Thank you very much.